Kenneth Martinez walked into the luxury boutique, holding his 7-year-old daughter Sophie's hand, and every eye in the store turned to stare, not with welcome, with judgment. The ex-cop in his worn jeans and faded jacket didn't belong in a place where handbags cost more than his monthly rent. But Sophie's birthday was tomorrow, and she'd asked for just one thing, a specific dress she'd seen in the window. The dress with the sparkles that reminded her of stars. Kenneth would move heaven and earth to make his daughter smile. He just didn't expect the store manager to block his path with a sneer and say, "I think you're lost. This store isn't for people like you." What the manager didn't know was that the billionaire owner of this luxury empire owed Kenneth her life, and she was about to walk through that door. If you want to know how a janitor humiliated in a luxury store became the man who saved a billionaire from her own employee's murder plot, hit that subscribe button. This story proves that character isn't measured by what you wear. It's measured by what you do when no one's watching. Kenneth Martinez was 36 years old and hadn't worn a badge in 4 years, not since the night his wife Elena died giving birth to their daughter Sophie. Not since he'd held his newborn baby girl in one arm while saying goodbye to the woman he loved with all his heart. Not since his entire world had shattered and reformed around a tiny 7-pound miracle who needed him more than any job ever could. Elena had been a kindergarten teacher, 28 years old, full of life, planning Sophie's nursery with the kind of joy that made Kenneth believe in happily ever after. The pregnancy had been smooth, no complications, no warning signs, just routine checkups where doctors smiled and said everything looked perfect. Then came the delivery. Sophie was born healthy. 10 fingers, 10 toes, lungs that announced her arrival with impressive volume. Kenneth had cried holding her, had looked into those tiny eyes and felt his heart expand in ways he didn't know were possible. "You did it, babe," he'd whispered to Elena. "She's perfect. You're perfect." Elena had smiled, tired but radiant. "Our baby girl, our Sophie." Those were her last words. 30 minutes later, the hemorrhaging started. Postpartum hemorrhage, massive, uncontrollable. The doctors worked for 2 hours trying to save her. Kenneth stood outside the operating room holding newborn Sophie while nurses ran past with blood bags and crash carts. Elena died at 3:47 a.m. Kenneth became a widower and a single father in the same night. The police department had been understanding, gave him paternity leave, told him to take his time, assured him his job would be waiting. Kenneth's partner, Detective Mike Torres, had promised to cover his cases. "Family first, hermano, always family first." Kenneth tried to go back after 3 months, couldn't focus, couldn't sleep knowing Sophie was with babysitters instead of parents, couldn't chase suspects through dark alleys when his daughter needed him to chase away nightmares, couldn't risk leaving Sophie an orphan, so he quit, turned in his badge at 32, took a job as a night janitor at Thornton Tower, a luxury office building downtown, steady hours, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Sophie slept through his shifts. Kenneth's mother watched her at night. Kenneth picked her up every morning, made breakfast, took her to preschool, spent the day being dad, put her to bed, then went to work. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't what he'd trained for, it wasn't the career he'd built, but it let him be present for Sophie, let him be the parent she deserved, let him keep the promise he'd made to Elena, that their daughter would never feel alone. 4 years later, Kenneth was 36. Sophie was 7. They lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood. Not fancy, but safe. Kenneth had chosen it carefully. Good schools nearby, park within walking distance, neighbors who looked out for each other. The apartment was modest. Living room with a second-hand couch Kenneth had reupholstered himself. Kitchen with appliances that were older than Sophie but still worked. 2 small bedrooms, Sophie's painted pink at her request, filled with books and stuffed animals and drawings taped to every wall. Kenneth's room was sparse. Bed, dresser, photo of Eleanor on the nightstand, where he could see her face first thing every morning. Kenneth drove a 15-year-old sedan that burned oil and made concerning noises when he accelerated too fast. He'd learned to do basic repairs himself. Oil changes, brake pads, minor fixes, because mechanics were expensive and money was tight. The car was ugly and unreliable, but it ran. That was enough. His wardrobe came mostly from thrift stores, jeans that were worn but clean, t-shirts that had seen better days, one decent jacket for parent-teacher conferences, one pair of dress shoes he'd owned since his police days, polished carefully so they still looked presentable. Kenneth wasn't vain, didn't care what he wore. But sometimes he felt the judgment, the looks from other parents at Sophie's school who drove luxury SUVs and wore designer athleisure, the subtle condescension when they learned he was a janitor. He'd learned to ignore it. Sophie didn't care that her dad wasn't wealthy. She cared that he showed up. Every school play, every parent breakfast, every field trip where he volunteered as a chaperone. Kenneth might not have money, but he had time, had presence, had love to give in quantities that mattered more than bank accounts. Money was always tight. Kenneth budgeted meticulously. Rent took half his paycheck, utilities another chunk, groceries carefully planned with coupons and sales. Sophie's needs always came first. New shoes when she outgrew the old ones, school supplies, birthday parties for her friends, the occasional treat when she'd been especially good. Kenneth's needs came last. He wore clothes until they literally fell apart. Ate ramen for dinner more nights than he'd admit. Skipped doctor appointments because co-pays were expensive. Lived with a cavity for 6 months because dental work wasn't in the budget. He didn't complain. This was the choice he'd made. Sophie over career, fatherhood over money, presence over prestige. And Sophie was thriving, happy, healthy, loved. She was doing well in school, reading above grade level, excelling at math, making friends easily. Her teacher said she was kind to other children, that she shared without being asked, that she had the biggest heart. "She's special," Mrs. Henderson had told Kenneth at the last parent-teacher conference. "Not because she's gifted academically, though she is bright, but because she's emotionally intelligent in ways most 7-year-olds aren't. She notices when other kids are sad, tries to help. I've seen her share her lunch with a boy who forgot his, invite the lonely kid to play at recess. That kind of empathy is rare. You're raising a beautiful human being, Mr. Martinez," Kenneth had cried in his car after that conference, because Sophie's kindness was Elena's legacy. Elena had been like that, generous, compassionate, always noticing people who were hurting and trying to help. Sophie had never met her mother, but somehow she'd inherited Elena's heart. That was what mattered, not Kenneth's bank account or his job title or his worn-out clothes. Sophie was happy, healthy, loved. Growing into the kind of person the world needed more of. That was enough. That was everything. Sophie's 8th birthday was tomorrow. Kenneth had saved for months, asked her what she wanted, expected her to say toys or books or maybe a trip to the zoo. Instead, Sophie had taken his hand and walked him to the window of Elise Boutique, the luxury clothing store on 5th Avenue, where mannequins wore dresses that cost more than Kenneth made in a month. She'd pressed her nose against the glass and pointed at a navy blue dress with silver sequins scattered across the skirt like stars. "That one, Daddy. The star dress. It's so pretty." Kenneth's heart had sunk. The dress probably cost $1,000, maybe more, way beyond his budget. But Sophie looked at it with such wonder, such pure childhood joy. "Why that dress, Mija?" "Because Mommy liked stars. You said she used to look at stars with you before I was born. And this dress has stars on it, So if I wear it, maybe I'll feel close to Mommy even though I never met her." Kenneth had cried right there on the sidewalk. How could he say no to that? How could he deny his daughter this connection to the mother she'd never known? So he'd picked up extra shifts, worked double time, skipped meals, saved every penny, and somehow, miraculously, scraped together $800. Not enough for the dress at full price, but maybe enough if it was on sale. Maybe enough if he explained to the store that it was for his daughter's birthday. That's how Kenneth found himself walking into Elise Boutique on a Saturday afternoon, holding Sophie's hand, wearing his nicest clothes, which were still worn jeans, scuffed boots, and a jacket that had seen better days. The store was magnificent. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, soft classical music, mannequins in designer gowns, salespeople in expensive suits. The kind of place where even the air felt exclusive. Kenneth approached the counter. A young salesperson, maybe 25, blonde, immaculate makeup, looked him up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Can I help you?" Her tone suggested she doubted it. "Hi, my daughter's birthday is tomorrow. There's a dress in the window, navy blue with silver sequins, and I'd like to buy it for her." The salesperson glanced at Sophie, then back at Kenneth. "That dress is $1,200. Kenneth swallowed. More than he'd saved. "Is it on sale?" "No, and we don't do payment plans." "I have $800 cash. Could we—" "Sir." The salesperson's smile was condescending. "This isn't a bargain store. If you can't afford our prices, perhaps you should shop somewhere more appropriate for your budget." Kenneth felt heat rise in his face, felt the familiar anger from his cop days, the anger at injustice, at people abusing power, at cruelty disguised as professionalism. But he kept his voice calm. "It's for my daughter's birthday. It's special to her. Please, is there anything you can do?" "Brian!" the salesperson called toward the back. "We need the manager." A man emerged from the office. Late 30s, expensive suit, slicked back hair, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. Brian Castellano, according to his name tag. "Store manager." Brian looked Kenneth up and down with open contempt. "Problem?" "This gentleman wants to buy the navy sequined dress. He only has $800. Brian's laugh was cruel. "The $1,200 dress? Sir, I think you're lost. This store caters to a certain clientele. People who can actually afford luxury, not people who—" He gestured at Kenneth's outfit. "Well, you understand." Sophie tugged Kenneth's hand. "Daddy, what's wrong?" Kenneth knelt down. "Nothing, Mika, let's go." But Brian wasn't done. "Wait, let me guess. You're probably thinking you can cause a scene, and we'll give you a discount to make you leave quietly. That's not how this works. You want that dress? Come back when you can afford it. Or better yet, don't come back at all. You're making our real customers uncomfortable." Kenneth looked around. 3 other shoppers were watching, all in expensive clothes, all with the same judgmental expressions, like he was a stain on their perfect world. The cop in Kenneth wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, wanted to point out that he'd been a decorated detective who'd saved lives while Brian was selling overpriced clothes to people with more money than sense. But the father in Kenneth won. Sophie was on the verge of tears. This was supposed to be special. He wasn't going to let her see him lose his temper. "You're right," Kenneth said quietly. "We'll leave. Sorry to bother you." He stood up, took Sophie's hand, and turned toward the door. That's when the back office door opened, and a woman's voice cut through the boutique like a knife. "Brian, what the hell is going on out here?" Kenneth froze. He knew that voice. Hadn't heard it in 4 years, but he'd recognize it anywhere. Piper Elise walked into the main boutique, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. She was 42 years old, stunning, dressed in a tailored black suit that screamed executive power. Dark brown hair pulled back in a severe bun. Sharp green eyes that missed nothing, the kind of presence that made people stand straighter without realizing it. Piper Elise, owner of the Elise fashion empire, 50 boutiques across the country, billion-dollar company, Forbes list, Business Insider cover, one of the most successful self-made businesswomen in America. And 4 years ago, Kenneth Martinez had saved her life. Piper's eyes swept the boutique, landed on Kenneth, and went wide with recognition. "Kenneth." Brian stepped forward. "Ms. Elise, I'm handling this. This man was trying to—" "Shut up, Brian." Piper didn't even look at him. She was staring at Kenneth like she'd seen a ghost. "Kenneth Martinez. Oh my God, it's really you." Kenneth managed a weak smile. "Hi, Piper." Piper crossed the boutique in 5 strides and pulled Kenneth into a hug that clearly surprised everyone watching. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. 4 years. I tried to find you. I called the police department and they said you'd resigned. Left no forwarding information. I wanted to thank you, to repay you, and you just disappeared. I had Sophie to raise. Didn't need thanks." 4 years ago, Kenneth had been working private security at Thornton Tower, one of his last jobs before he transitioned to janitorial work. It was supposed to be an easy gig. Patrol the parking garage, check doors, make sure nobody broke into expensive cars. That night had been cold. November. Kenneth had been making his rounds when he heard screaming. Female voice. Terrified. Coming from the executive level of the parking garage, every instinct from his police days kicked in. Kenneth ran toward the sound. Found a woman backing away from a man with a gun. The woman was Piper Elise. Kenneth recognized her from business magazines. The man was Marcus Elise, her ex-husband, violating a restraining order. "You took everything from me," Marcus was screaming. "My money, my company, my reputation. Now I'm taking your life." Kenneth didn't think, didn't call for backup, didn't wait. Just ran forward and put himself between Piper and the gun. "Sir, put the weapon down." Marcus had turned the gun on Kenneth. "Get out of here. This doesn't concern you." "Can't do that. Lady's in danger. I'm a cop." Kenneth wasn't. Not anymore. But the training never left. "You're a security guard in a cheap uniform. Move or I'll shoot you too." Kenneth hadn't moved, had kept talking, kept Marcus focused on him instead of Piper. Had been trying to de-escalate when Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger. The shot was deafening in the concrete garage. Kenneth felt fire explode in his left shoulder, went down hard, but he'd bought Piper time to run, to call 911, to get to safety. Police arrived 3 minutes later, found Kenneth bleeding on the garage floor, Marcus fleeing, Piper trying to stop Kenneth's bleeding with her scarf. Kenneth spent 3 weeks in the hospital. The bullet had torn through muscle and nicked bone. He'd lost partial function in his left arm for 6 months, had to do extensive physical therapy. The pain had been excruciating, but Piper was alive. That was what mattered. She'd visited him every day in the hospital, brought flowers, tried to give him money for his medical bills, offered him a job running security for her company, offered to pay for Sophie's education, offered everything. Kenneth had refused it all. "I was just doing my job." "You took a bullet for a stranger. Let me help you. Please." "I don't need help. I need to focus on my daughter. But thank you." After he got out of the hospital, Kenneth had changed his number, left the security company, started working as a janitor where nobody would find him, and tried to make him a hero. He didn't want publicity, didn't want rewards, just wanted to be Dad. Piper had tried to find him, had called the security company, called the police department where he used to work, hit dead ends everywhere. Kenneth had vanished into private life. Until today. until he walked into her boutique desperate to buy his daughter a dress. Piper looked down at Sophie, who was staring up at this elegant stranger with wide eyes. "This is your daughter." "Sophie, say hello to Miss Elise." "Hello," Sophie whispered. Piper knelt down, bringing herself to Sophie's eye level. Her expression softened completely. "Hello, Sophie. Your father is a hero. Did you know that?" Sophie shook her head, looking uncertain. "Well, he is. He saved my life 4 years ago when a very bad person wanted to hurt me. Your daddy is the bravest man I've ever met. He got hurt protecting me, and I've been looking for him ever since to say thank you. I owe your daddy everything." Piper's voice was thick with emotion. She looked up at Kenneth with tears in her eyes. "I can't believe you're here. After all this time, I'd given up finding you." She stood up and turned to Brian with a look that could freeze fire. The warmth from moments ago vanished, replaced by cold fury. "Explain now. Why was Kenneth leaving?" Brian's confident smirk faltered. He wanted to buy a dress but couldn't afford it. I was simply explaining our pricing policy." "What dress?" "The navy sequined piece, $1,200. He only has $800. Piper's expression went cold. "And you told him to leave?" Well, yes. This is a luxury boutique. We have standards." "Standards." Piper's voice was ice. "Let me tell you about standards, Brian. 4 years ago I was being stalked by my ex-husband. He'd violated the restraining order 12 times. Police couldn't stop him. He cornered me in a parking garage at midnight, had a gun, was about to kill me because I'd divorced him and taken half his precious money in the settlement." She pointed at Kenneth. "This man was working security that night, ex-cop doing patrol in that garage. He heard me scream, ran toward danger instead of away from it, put himself between me and a man with a gun, took a bullet in the shoulder, saving my life, spent 3 weeks in the hospital, lost function in his left arm for 6 months. Kenneth touched his left shoulder unconsciously. The scar was still there. The arm had healed, mostly, still ached sometimes. Piper continued. Kenneth refused to press charges against my ex for shooting him. Said he was just doing his job. Refused the reward I offered. Refused media interviews. Refused everything except a simple thank you. He disappeared into private life to raise his daughter alone after his wife died. And you... She turned her full fury on Brian. You treated this man like garbage because he doesn't wear expensive clothes. Brian was pale. Miss Elise, I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't ask. You saw someone who didn't fit your image of wealth and decided they weren't worthy of basic human decency. That's not standards. That's cruelty. Piper turned to Kenneth. What dress does Sophie want? Kenneth hesitated. Piper, you don't have to. What dress, Kenneth? Sophie tugged her father's hand. The one with stars, Daddy. Piper smiled. The navy sequined dress. Excellent choice. She turned to the blonde salesperson. Get it. Sophie's size. Gift-wrapped. No charge. The salesperson rushed to obey. Brian opened his mouth to protest. Piper silenced him with a look. Not one word. 5 minutes later, Sophie was holding a beautiful wrapped box containing the dress of her dreams. She was beaming. Kenneth was fighting tears. Thank you, he managed. You didn't have to do this. Yes, I did. You saved my life and refused to let me repay you. I'm not missing this chance again. Piper glanced at Brian. You and I will talk later about standards and what happens to managers who forget that kindness costs nothing. Brian's face was ashen. Ms. Elise. Later, Brian, I have a guest to catch up with. Piper led Kenneth and Sophie to her private office in the back. Leather chairs, mahogany desk, windows overlooking Fifth Avenue. The kind of office that screamed success. Sophie sat in a chair examining her wrapped present with wonder. Kenneth sat across from Piper, feeling out of place in this luxurious space. "You look good," Piper said. "Older, tired, but good. Single-parent life. Doesn't leave much time for sleep." Sophie's mother died in childbirth 7 years ago. I raised Sophie alone. Piper's face softened. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "How would you? I dropped off the grid, quit the force, became a janitor. Just wanted to focus on being dad." "Janitor where?" "Thornton Tower, night shift." Piper nodded slowly. "How much do they pay you?" Kenneth shifted uncomfortably. "Enough. We get by." "That's not what I asked." $16 an hour, 30 hours a week. It's fine. I have benefits, flexible schedule. I can be there for Sophie." Piper did the math in her head. Kenneth could see her calculating. $480 a week, maybe $2,000 a month. Barely enough for rent and food. Definitely not enough for $1,000 dresses and unexpected expenses. "You saved for months for that dress, didn't you?" Kenneth didn't answer. Didn't need to. Piper leaned back in her chair. "I need a head of security for my company, someone I trust, someone with actual cop experience and investigative skills, someone who knows how to protect people instead of just looking intimidating in a suit. Job pays $90,000 a year. Full benefits, daylight hours. You'd work from the corporate office. Could bring Sophie sometimes if needed. Want it?" Kenneth's jaw dropped. "Piper, I've been looking for someone for 2 years. Can't find anyone I trust. Everyone wants the job for the paycheck and the title. Nobody actually cares about keeping people safe. You care. You proved that when you took a bullet for a stranger. So I'm offering. Head of Security, Elise Fashion Corporation, yes or no?" I don't know what to say." "Say yes. I need someone who sees people like you saw me 4 years ago. Someone who doesn't judge by appearances. Someone who protects the vulnerable instead of bullying them." Kenneth glanced at Sophie. $90,000 a year. More than quadruple what he made now. Sophie could have new clothes, birthday presents without months of saving, college fund, stability. But it meant leaving the safe janitor job, meant more responsibility, meant possible danger. "Is it dangerous?" Kenneth asked. "The security work?" "Some risk, nothing like police work. Mostly corporate security, employee background checks, stalker prevention, that sort of thing. But I won't lie. Sometimes my ex-partners or competitors get aggressive. Sometimes I get threats. That's why I need someone skilled." Kenneth thought about Elena, about the promise he'd made to always be there for Sophie, about the reality that $90,000 a year could change their lives. "Can I think about it?" "Take all the time you need." Piper wrote something on a business card. "My personal cell. Call me when you decide." They talked for another hour. Piper caught Kenneth up on her life. The divorce had been finalized. Ex-husband was in prison for attempted murder and violating restraining orders. Piper had thrown herself into her business, built her company into an empire, opened boutiques, expanded into online retail, became a billionaire through sheer determination and brilliant strategy. "But I'm lonely," Piper admitted. "Success is great, money is nice, but at the end of the day, I go home to an empty penthouse and eat dinner alone. I threw away relationships for career. Now I'm 42, alone, wondering if I made the right choices." Kenneth understood that. "I threw away career for relationship, with Sophie. Some days I wonder too. Wonder if Elena would want me cleaning floors. Wonder if I gave up too much. But then Sophie smiles and I know I chose right. Money doesn't hug you goodnight." "No, it doesn't." Piper smiled. "Take the job, Kenneth. Not because you need money, but because I need someone like you. Someone who remembers what actually matters." Kenneth left the boutique that day with Sophie's dress, a job offer, and a lot to think about. Sophie was thrilled with her present. Kenneth was overwhelmed by possibilities. He spent the weekend considering, called his mother for advice. She said take the job, called his old police partner Mike. He said Kenneth was wasting his talents as a janitor, called Elena's sister. She said Elena would want Sophie to have opportunities. Monday morning, Kenneth called Piper. I'll take the job, but I have conditions. Name them. Sophie comes first. Always. If she's sick or needs me, I leave work. No exceptions. Agreed. I need flexibility for school events, parent-teacher conferences, birthday parties, all of it. Agreed. And I won't compromise my ethics. If I see something wrong, I report it. Even if it's against company interests. Especially if it's against company interests. That's exactly why I want you. When can you start? Kenneth started 2 weeks later. Thornton Tower was sorry to lose him. Piper was thrilled to have him. The corporate office was impressive. Entire floor dedicated to security operations, monitoring systems, background check departments, executive protection teams. Kenneth's job was to oversee all of it, evaluate threats, investigate concerns, keep Piper and her executives safe. It was challenging. Used his detective skills again. Made him feel purposeful beyond just providing for Sophie. Sophie loved it. Visited the office sometimes after school. Piper would stop by with snacks, would ask about second grade, would treat Sophie like she mattered. The billionaire CEO and the 7-year-old formed an unlikely friendship. I like Miss Piper, Sophie told Kenneth one evening. She's nice and she smells good, like vanilla. Kenneth laughed. She does smell nice. Do you like her? She's my boss. Of course I like working for her. No, I mean, do you like her? Like how Prince Charming likes Cinderella? Kenneth nearly dropped the plate he was washing. Where did that come from? You smile different when you talk about her, and your voice gets soft. Like how you sound when you talk about Mommy. That's how people sound when they love someone. Out of the mouths of children. Kenneth didn't have a good answer, because Sophie might be right. Kenneth had noticed Piper. How could he not? She was brilliant, driven, successful. But more than that, she was kind. She treated service workers with respect, remembered people's names, asked about their families, donated millions to charity, used her success to help others. And she was lonely. Kenneth saw it in her eyes sometimes. The same loneliness he felt eating dinner alone after Sophie went to bed. The same wondering if this was all life had to offer. But she was his boss. His billionaire boss. Getting involved would be complicated, inappropriate, potentially disastrous. Kenneth pushed those thoughts aside, focused on work. And that's when he started noticing things about Brian Castellano, the store manager who'd humiliated him. Brian still worked at the Fifth Avenue boutique, still managed the store, but Piper had demoted him from regional manager to single store manager, cut his bonuses, made it clear his behavior was unacceptable. Brian resented it. Kenneth could see it in the way Brian looked at Piper during corporate meetings. Cold, calculating, hostile. Kenneth started paying attention, reviewing Brian's employee file, running background checks, following his digital footprint. What he found was concerning. Brian Castellano had worked for Elise Fashion for 8 years, started as a sales associate, worked his way up to assistant manager, then regional manager overseeing 5 boutiques. Piper had promoted him based on sales performance and employee reviews that praised his charisma and customer service skills. But something had changed 2 years ago. Brian's performance reviews started slipping. Complaints from employees about his temper. Customer complaints about aggressive sales tactics. Nothing fireable, but troubling. Then came Kenneth's humiliation at the boutique. Piper had demoted Brian from regional manager to single store manager at the Fifth Avenue location, cut his bonuses, made it clear that treating customers with contempt was unacceptable regardless of their appearance or ability to pay. Brian had seemed contrite, apologized, promised to do better. Piper had given him a second chance, but Kenneth saw something else. The way Brian looked at Piper during corporate meetings, cold, calculating, resentful, like he was mentally adding her to a list of people who'd wronged him. Kenneth started digging into Brian's finances. What he found was alarming. Brian had serious debt. $75,000 across 3 maxed-out credit cards. Another $30,000 in personal loans from questionable sources, the kind of lenders who charged 20% interest and sent enforcers when payments were late. Bank statements showed regular payments to online gambling sites, sports betting, online poker, high-stakes fantasy football leagues. Brian was drowning financially, making $55,000 a year as a single-store manager, paying $2,000 a month just in minimum payments on his debt, living paycheck to paycheck despite working for a luxury brand. But his lifestyle didn't match his income. Brian drove a BMW, wore Rolex watches, vacationed in the Maldives, ate at 5-star restaurants, posted Instagram photos of bottle service at exclusive clubs. Kenneth tracked Brian's bank deposits, found irregular cash deposits every month, $3,000 here, $5,000 there, never the same amount, never with clear sources, just cash appearing in Brian's account from nowhere. Someone was paying Brian. The question was why. Kenneth dug deeper, requested inventory reports from the Fifth Avenue boutique for the past 2 years, found irregularities that made his detective instincts scream. Expensive items were being marked as damaged or lost at suspicious rates. A $15,000 evening gown damaged by red wine, an $8,000 handbag lost in shipping, a $20,000 fur coat destroyed by moths, all within 1 month. All at the Fifth Avenue location, all approved by Brian as manager. Kenneth cross-referenced the dates. Every time an expensive item was marked damaged or lost, Brian made a cash deposit within a week. The amounts roughly matched the wholesale cost of the missing merchandise. Brian was stealing, marking items as damaged, then selling them on the black market or through consignment stores, pocketing the cash. He'd stolen an estimated $120,000 worth of merchandise over the past year alone. Kenneth compiled the evidence, spreadsheets tracking inventory losses, bank statements showing suspicious deposits, security footage from the boutique showing Brian removing items from the stockroom after hours, email correspondence where Brian had approved his own damage reports without requiring second signatures. Kenneth brought it all to Piper in her corporate office, laid out the evidence across her desk. Brian's been stealing from you, systematically, for at least a year, probably longer. Piper looked at the evidence. Her face was calm, but her eyes were furious. How much? Hard to say exactly. At least $120,000 from the Fifth Avenue location alone. If he's doing this at other stores, could be $500,000 or more. How sure are you? 90%. The pattern is clear, but I need more to make it criminal prosecution solid. Right now, a good lawyer could argue the losses were legitimate. I need to catch him in the act. Surveillance, sting operation, something that proves he's knowingly stealing. Piper nodded slowly. Do it, whatever you need. If he's stealing from my company, I want proof that will stand up in court. Then I want him arrested and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. There's something else, Kenneth said carefully. The way Brian looks at you in meetings, it's concerning. He resents the demotion, resents the pay cut, resents you. I think the theft isn't just about money. It's about revenge. Revenge for what? For facing consequences for his behavior. Some people can't handle being held accountable. They take it personally, build narratives where they're the victim and everyone else is the enemy. Brian strikes me as that type." Piper considered this. "You think he's dangerous?" "I think he's resentful, in debt, and stealing from a woman who humiliated him, in his mind, by demoting him in front of his peers. That combination concerns me. I want to investigate further. Make sure this is just theft and not something worse." "Do it. And Kenneth, be careful. If you're right about Brian being resentful, confronting him could be dangerous." "I'm always careful. Learned that lesson raising Sophie. Can't afford to take unnecessary risks anymore." Kenneth spent 2 weeks investigating, set up hidden cameras in the stockroom, monitored Brian's movements, tracked his outside activities. The first break came from email surveillance. Kenneth had gotten Piper's permission to monitor company emails. Brian's corporate account was clean, but Kenneth noticed Brian was using his personal email for work communication sometimes, against company policy. Kenneth obtained a warrant through his old police contacts. What he found in Brian's personal email was explosive. Messages to and from Marcus Elise, Piper's ex-husband, currently serving 25 years for attempted murder and violating restraining orders. The emails were coded, but clear enough. Marcus was paying Brian $5,000 a month to sabotage Piper's business. The inventory theft was generating cash for Brian, but the real goal was bigger: destroy Piper's company and reputation. Marcus's plan was multi-layered. First, the inventory theft would create financial problems. Then Brian would plant evidence that Piper was embezzling, skimming money from her own company to offshore accounts, forge documents, create false paper trails, make it look like Piper was stealing millions while her business struggled. The scandal would destroy her. Business partners would abandon her. Investors would sue. The SEC would investigate. Even if she was eventually cleared, her reputation would be ruined. The fashion empire she'd built would collapse. Marcus's revenge for Piper, divorcing him and sending him to prison, destroy everything she'd worked for, leave her penniless and disgraced. Kenneth brought this evidence to Piper, showed her the emails, the plan, the betrayal. Piper was shaken but not surprised. "Marcus always said he'd make me pay. I thought prison would stop him. I was naive. He's using Brian as his weapon, paying him enough to make the risk worthwhile. Brian's desperate for money, resentful about the demotion, perfect target for manipulation. What do? We call the police, get Brian arrested for theft and conspiracy, get Marcus charged with additional crimes from prison, end this." But there was more. Kenneth kept digging, found something in Brian's internet history that made his blood run cold. Searches for untraceable poisons, specifically substances that would mimic natural illness, heart attacks, strokes, sudden organ failure, things that wouldn't trigger autopsies or raise suspicions. Brian had visited dark web forums, asked questions about obtaining ricin, polonium, and other exotic poisons. How much was lethal? How to administer without detection? How to make death look natural? He'd researched Piper's schedule, her habits, where she ate, who prepared her food, her coffee preferences, her vitamin routine, looking for opportunities. Kenneth found a shopping list in Brian's deleted files. Syringes, gloves, chemicals that could be combined to create toxic substances. The list was dated 3 days from now. Brian wasn't just planning to destroy Piper's business. He was planning to kill her. Kenneth called an emergency meeting with Piper and her attorney, laid out everything. "Brian is planning to murder you within the next week based on this shopping list. He's been researching poisons, studying your schedule, looking for opportunities. This has escalated beyond theft. We need police protection now." Piper's attorney looked at the evidence. "This is enough for a warrant. We can have Brian arrested today." But Piper hesitated. "If we arrest him for conspiracy and attempted theft, will the murder charges stick? Or will a good lawyer argue the poison research was hypothetical? Academic interest? The kind of thing people Google out of curiosity? The attorney frowned. Without concrete proof he obtained poison, or made an actual attempt, the murder conspiracy might not hold. We can definitely get him for the theft and fraud conspiracy, but the murder charge would be harder to prove beyond reasonable doubt. Kenneth understood what Piper was thinking. You want to catch him in the act, let him make a move, then nail him for attempted murder with irrefutable evidence. Is that insane? Piper asked. It's dangerous, Kenneth said carefully. But I understand the logic. If Brian gets convicted only for theft, he might serve 2 years and get out. Still connected to Marcus, still holding a grudge, still a threat. But if we catch him attempting murder, he goes away for decades. You're safe. Marcus loses his weapon. The threat ends permanently. Piper nodded. I didn't build this company by playing it safe. Set the trap. I'll be the bait. You keep me alive. Just like you did 4 years ago. Kenneth wanted to argue. Every protective instinct screamed to refuse. This was Sophie's honorary aunt they were talking about, the woman who'd become important to both of them, the woman Kenneth was developing feelings for that went beyond professional respect. But he also understood Piper's reasoning. A partial conviction wouldn't end the threat. Only catching Brian red-handed would guarantee safety. We do this my way, Kenneth said finally. I control every variable. You follow my instructions exactly. Any deviation and we abort. Understood? Understood. They spent 3 days planning. Kenneth positioned undercover officers in the boutique disguised as customers, set up additional surveillance cameras, monitored Brian's every move, controlled Piper's food and drink to prevent actual poisoning attempts. Kenneth leaked information to Brian through an office gossip. Piper would be working late at the Fifth Avenue boutique in 2 days, reviewing year-end inventory personally. She'd be alone after closing. Brian took the bait. His internet searches intensified. More research on poisons, more questions about dosage and administration. He cleared his schedule for that evening. The night of the operation, Kenneth positioned himself in the back office of the boutique with 2 plainclothes detectives. Piper sat in her main office reviewing actual financial reports, wearing a concealed microphone and panic button. They waited. Brian entered the boutique at 9:47 p.m., used his manager key. The store was closed, lights dim. He walked through the main floor carrying a small case. Kenneth watched via hidden cameras, saw Brian approach Piper's office, saw him pull a syringe from the case. Later analysis would show it contained a massive dose of insulin, enough to induce fatal hypoglycemic shock that would mimic natural causes in someone Piper's age and stress level. Brian entered the office. Ms. Elise, I didn't know you'd be here this late. Piper looked up calmly. Brian, I could say the same. I just came to check on something. Inventory issue. He moved closer. The syringe was hidden in his sleeve. That's interesting, because according to my head of security, you've been stealing inventory for a year, working with my ex-husband Marcus, planning to frame me for embezzlement and researching how to poison me. Brian froze. His face went from surprised to calculating to desperate in seconds. I don't know what you're talking about. No? Piper stood up. Kenneth, officers, come out. Kenneth emerged from the back room with the 2 detectives. All had weapons drawn. Brian's hand moved toward the syringe. Kenneth was faster, crossed the distance in 2 steps, grabbed Brian's wrist, twisted until he dropped the needle, had him face down on the floor in handcuffs in under 5 seconds, all his police training coming back like muscle memory. Brian Castellano, one detective said, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, theft, embezzlement, and fraud. They read him his rights. Brian screamed that it was a setup, that Piper was framing him, that Marcus would destroy her, that she couldn't prove anything, but Kenneth had everything on camera. Brian entering after hours with a syringe, the concealed weapon, Piper's calm accusation that Brian didn't deny, his reaching for the needle, all recorded in 4K video from multiple angles with clear audio. The syringe was bagged as evidence. Later testing would show the massive insulin dose, lethal, designed to kill. Brian had walked into the trap perfectly. Kenneth brought everything to Piper immediately, showed her the emails, the surveillance footage, the proof of Brian's betrayal and murderous intent. Piper was shaken but not surprised. Marcus always said he'd make me pay. I thought prison would stop him. I was wrong. We need to call the police. Get Brian arrested. Protect you. Will the evidence hold up in court? Kenneth reviewed what he had. Some of it was obtained through surveillance that might not be admissible. The poison research was concerning but not proof of crime. The inventory theft was provable. The conspiracy with Marcus was borderline. It's complicated. We can get him for theft, maybe conspiracy, but the murder plot might not stick. He hasn't actually attempted it yet. Could claim it was research for a novel or just curiosity. Piper nodded slowly. So we need him to make a move, to try something. Then we catch him red-handed. That's dangerous. You'd be putting yourself at risk. I didn't build this company by playing it safe. Piper's eyes were hard. Set the trap. I'll be the bait. You keep me alive, just like 4 years ago. Kenneth wanted to argue, wanted to refuse. But he saw the determination in Piper's face. She wasn't going to hide, wasn't going to let Marcus win from prison, wasn't going to let Brian destroy everything she'd built. So they set the trap. Kenneth told Brian that Piper would be working late at the Fifth Avenue boutique in 3 days, reviewing year-end inventory personally, would be alone in the store after closing. Perfect opportunity for Brian to make his move. Brian took the bait. Kenneth watched via hidden cameras as Brian entered the boutique after hours, saw him approach Piper's office where she was reviewing reports, saw him pull a syringe from his pocket. Later analysis would show it contained a lethal dose of insulin designed to induce hypoglycemic shock that would look like natural causes. Brian entered the office. "Miss Elise, I didn't know you'd be here this late." Piper looked up. "Brian, I could say the same. I just came to check on something. Inventory issue." He moved closer. The syringe was hidden in his sleeve. "That's interesting, because according to my head of security, you've been stealing inventory for a year, working with my ex-husband, planning to frame me for embezzlement." Brian froze. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No." Piper stood up. "Kenneth, come out." Kenneth emerged from the back room where he'd been waiting. 2 police officers followed him. Brian's face went white. He reached for the syringe. Kenneth was faster. Grabbed Brian's wrist, twisted, forced him to drop the needle, had him in handcuffs in 5 seconds flat. "Brian Castellano," one officer said, "you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, theft, and embezzlement." They read him his rights. Brian screamed that it was a setup, that Piper was framing him, that Marcus would destroy her, that she couldn't prove anything, but Kenneth had everything on camera. Brian entering after hours, the syringe, the admission about Marcus, all recorded, all admissible as evidence because it was Piper's private property and she'd consented to surveillance. Brian went to prison, got 15 years for attempted murder and conspiracy. Marcus got additional charges for orchestrating the plot from prison. Got his sentence extended by 20 years. Justice was served. Piper was safe. Kenneth had protected her again. The media coverage was intense. Billionaire saved by ex-cop security chief. Store manager's murder plot foiled. Love protects fashion empire. That last headline made Kenneth uncomfortable. Love? Where did they get that? Except maybe it was true. After the trial, after the media died down, Piper invited Kenneth to dinner at her penthouse, just the two of them. Sophie was spending the night with Kenneth's mother. "I wanted to thank you," Piper said over wine. "Again. You've saved my life twice now. Just doing my job." "Is that all it is? Just a job?" Kenneth set down his glass. "What are you asking?" "Sophie asked me something last week when she visited the office. She asked if I wanted to marry her daddy because that would make me her bonus mommy." Kenneth closed his eyes. "I'm sorry. She's 7. She says things." "I told her I'd love that," Piper interrupted, "if her daddy wanted the same thing." Kenneth looked up. Piper was watching him with vulnerable eyes. The billionaire CEO looked terrified, like she'd just risked everything on a confession. "Kenneth, I'm 42 years old. I've built an empire, made billions, accomplished everything I set out to do professionally. Started with nothing. My parents died when I was 25, left me a failing manufacturing company and mountains of debt. I transformed that into a fashion empire, fought my way to the Forbes list, proved everyone who doubted me wrong. But you know what? It's lonely at the top. Incredibly, devastatingly lonely." She took a breath, composing her thoughts. "I go home to a 10,000 square foot penthouse every night, eat takeout at a table designed for 12, sleep in a king-sized bed alone, wake up to silence, call my assistant if I need someone to talk to because I don't have friends, just business acquaintances who want something from me. My social circle consists of people who value my money, not me. My relationships have all been transactional, men who wanted access to my wealth or my connections, women who wanted to network or show off their billionaire friend. Nobody who actually cares about me as a person." Kenneth listened, seeing past the wealth and power to the loneliness underneath. "Then you walked into my boutique 6 months ago," Piper continued. "Worn jeans, scuffed boots, counting out $800 in cash for your daughter's birthday dress. And Brian humiliated you, made you feel small, worthless, unworthy. I saw your face, the shame, the hurt. And then I saw you kneel down and comfort Sophie. Tell her it was okay, that you'd find another way. You put her feelings above your own pride. That's when I remembered who you were. The man who took a bullet for me 4 years ago. The man I'd been searching for ever since." She wiped her eyes. "These past 6 months working with you, laughing with you, talking with you, watching you be an amazing father, I've realized something. I don't want to be alone anymore. I want what you have. Not money, not power. Connection, family, someone who sees me. You see me, Kenneth. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, just Piper. The woman who's terrified of ending up old and alone, surrounded by money that can't hug her back. The woman who wants someone to share breakfast with, who wants to hear about someone's day and actually care, who wants to matter to someone beyond what she can provide financially." Piper gripped his hands tighter. "I want you, and Sophie, and a family. I want what you and Elena had, what you're building with your daughter. I want to be part of it. I want Sophie to call me Piper Mommy and teach me how to braid hair and ask me to help with homework. I want to wake up next to you and know that you chose me, not for money or status, but because you actually love me. If you'll have me, if I'm not too late, if you can make room in your heart for someone new without forgetting Elena, if I'm enough." Kenneth's heart was pounding. His throat was tight with emotion. "Piper, you're asking if you're enough. You're a billionaire CEO who kneels down to talk to 7-year-olds at their eye level, who gave my daughter her dream dress and refused to let me pay, who hired me because you valued character over credentials, who risks your life to catch murderers instead of hiding behind lawyers, who makes Sophie laugh, who remembers my coffee order, Who asks about my day and actually listens? You're not just enough. You're everything I didn't know I needed. He took a shaky breath. I'm a widower, a single dad, an ex-cop working security. You're a billionaire CEO who owns 50 boutiques. This is complicated, yes. Unconventional, absolutely. Impossible, no. Piper reached across the table and took both his hands. I don't care about conventional. Conventional is boring. Conventional is dying alone in a penthouse surrounded by expensive furniture. I care about you. About how you make me laugh. How you challenge me. How you call me out when I'm wrong instead of telling me what I want to hear. How you see me as a person, not a bank account. How you're gentle with Sophie, but fierce protecting people you love. How you kept your promise to Elena by being the most devoted father I've ever seen. How you took a bullet for a stranger and refused reward. That's what I want. Not someone who's impressed by money. Someone who's impressed by character. You're that person. Kenneth thought about Elena, about the promise he'd made to love her forever, about guilt, about the fear that moving on meant betraying her memory. But he also thought about what Elena would actually want. She'd been the most generous person he'd ever known, would give her last dollar to someone in need, would volunteer at shelters, would see the good in everyone. Elena wouldn't want him to be alone forever, wouldn't want Sophie growing up without a mother figure, wouldn't want Kenneth to turn away from love because he was afraid of dishonoring her memory. I love you, Kenneth said quietly. I've been trying not to, trying to keep it professional, telling myself you're my boss and this is inappropriate and I can't possibly be good enough for someone like you. But I am. I love how you treat Sophie like she matters, not like an accessory or an inconvenience, but like an actual person whose thoughts and feelings count. How you remember names of janitors and security guards and treat service workers with respect. How you use your success to help others instead of hoarding it. How you're brilliant but humble. How you're strong but vulnerable. How you admitted you're lonely instead of pretending your life is perfect. How you make me feel like I can be more than just a janitor or an ex-cop. How you make me want to be the man Elena thought I was. The man Sophie deserves as a father. The man worthy of you. Piper was crying now, happy tears streaming down her face. Is that a yes? She managed. That's a yes to all of it. To dating you. To building a life together. To letting Sophie have the mother figure she's been wishing for. To risking my heart again even though I'm terrified. To choosing love over fear. Yes. They dated for a year, slowly, carefully, building a relationship while navigating the complications of Kenneth being Piper's employee. The first few months were tricky. They tried to keep the relationship private, professional at work, personal only outside the office. But hiding feelings was harder than either expected. Kenneth would catch himself staring at Piper during security briefings. Piper would make excuses to visit the security office just to see him. Employees noticed, started whispering. This isn't sustainable, Piper said 4 months in. They were having dinner at her penthouse. Sophie was spending the night with Kenneth's mother. People are talking, wondering if you're getting preferential treatment because we're dating. If I'm compromising company security by being involved with my head of security, I won't have people questioning your competence or my judgment. We need to change the structure. What do you want to do? I want you as my partner, not my employee. I'll hire a professional security firm to handle day-to-day operations. You can consult independently, eliminate the power dynamic, make our relationship equal, make this work without ethical compromises. It was the right decision professionally. Kenneth transitioned to an independent security consultant, contracted with Elise Fashion, but also took other clients. No longer directly employed by Piper. No more boss-employee complications. But it was hard for Kenneth. He'd enjoyed the steady paycheck, the benefits, the security of formal employment. Going freelance meant uncertainty. variable income, no safety net. Piper saw his struggle. I know this isn't what you wanted, but I need you to understand. You're more important to me than having you on payroll. I'd rather have you as my partner than my employee. I can figure out security operations, but I can't figure out life without you. I'm not going anywhere, Kenneth promised. Just adjusting. Again. Seems like I'm always adjusting my career for other priorities. Do you resent that? Kenneth considered honestly. No. I chose Sophie over police work. Now I'm choosing us over easy employment. Every choice has costs. I'm okay with the costs as long as what I'm building is worth it. Is it? Worth it? You're asking if you're worth giving up a steady job. Piper, you're worth everything. Sophie loved having Piper in their lives. Started calling her Piper Mommy to distinguish from Angel Mommy Eleanor. Would climb into Piper's lap during movie nights. Asked Piper to braid her hair. Wanted Piper at school events. Accepted her as part of the family with the ease of children who just want to be loved. Kenneth proposed on the 4th anniversary of the day he'd saved Piper's life in the parking garage. Got down on one knee in that same garage, now renovated and safe, where their story had started. Piper Elise, 4 years ago I took a bullet for you in this garage. Best decision of my life, not because it led to a job or money, but because it led to you, to us, to a family I didn't think I'd have again. Will you marry me? Piper said yes through tears. The wedding was small, 100 people, intimate, meaningful. Sophie was flower girl wearing her beloved navy dress with silver star sequins, the dress that had started everything. They got married at a garden venue. Simple, beautiful, personal. Kenneth's police buddies served as groomsmen. Piper's college friends were bridesmaids. Sophie stood between them at the altar holding the rings. The officiant smiled. We're here today to witness the marriage of two people who found each other through tragedy, built trust through protection, and chose love through complications. Kenneth and Piper's story isn't conventional. It started with bullets and ended with bouquets. But sometimes the best love stories are the ones that test us first. They wrote their own vows. Piper went first. Kenneth, you saved my life. But more than that, you taught me to live again. After my divorce, I was afraid of relationships, afraid to trust, afraid to be vulnerable. I built walls and told myself they were protection. They weren't. They were a prison. You showed me that love doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. You've been present for Sophie every single day of her life. Present for me through investigations and threats and Brian's murder plot. Present in ways that matter more than money or status. You've given me a family. A daughter who calls me Piper Mommy and teaches me about unconditional love. A partner who sees me, really sees me, not the billionaire or the CEO, but the woman who's lonely and scared and wants to matter beyond her bank account. I love you, not for taking that bullet, but for being the kind of man who would, for choosing courage over safety, for choosing family over career, for choosing love over fear. I promise to always be present, to show up, to be the partner you deserve and the bonus mother Sophie deserves. Kenneth's turn. His voice shook. Piper, when Elena died, I thought I'd never love anyone again. Thought my capacity for love had died with her. But love doesn't work that way. It grows. It expands. It makes room for new people without erasing old ones. You've shown me that I can honor Elena's memory while building a future with you. You've loved Sophie like she's yours. You've respected my past while building our future. You've challenged me to be more than a janitor or a bodyguard. You've made me believe I'm worthy of love again. I promise to protect you, not just physically, though I'll always stand between you and danger, but emotionally. To be your safe place, your partner, your equal. To build a life where Sophie grows up knowing love comes in many forms, where she sees strong women lead, where she understands that family isn't just blood, it's choice. I choose you, every day. In parking garages and boutiques and boardrooms and everywhere in between, they were pronounced married, kissed while everyone cheered. Sophie threw flower petals, the same silver star petals from her dress. Photographers captured the moment. Kenneth lifting Piper, kissing her, Sophie cheering between them, 100 people celebrating. 5 years later, they sat in their home's backyard watching Sophie, now 12, practice soccer. Piper coached from the sidelines with the same intensity she brought to boardrooms. Kenneth grilled burgers, their 3-year-old twin boys, James and Lucas, helping by supervising from their playpen. Piper had balanced work and family, hired a COO to run day-to-day operations, focused on strategy and spending time with her family, discovered that life was richer when measured in moments, not money. "I never thought I'd have this," Piper said, watching Sophie score a goal. A husband, children, a family that actually feels like family. After Marcus, I thought relationships meant danger. After the divorce, I thought I'd spend my life alone. Then you walked into my boutique looking for a dress for your daughter, and everything changed. Kenneth pulled her close. "Actually, I walked in and got humiliated by your manager. You changed things by remembering the man who'd saved your life, instead of judging the janitor in worn clothes. Best decision I ever made." Sophie ran over. "Did you see my goal?" "I saw it. That fake-out was brilliant." Piper high-fived her. "Can we get ice cream?" "Absolutely. Tell your team we're going for ice cream after practice." Sophie ran off. The twins babbled for attention. Kenneth picked up Lucas while Piper grabbed James. "Thank you," Kenneth said softly. "For what?" "For seeing me, for loving Sophie, for building this family, for showing me that love doesn't end when loss happens, it just changes forms. For proving that sometimes the person you judge in a boutique is actually the person you'll spend your life with." Piper smiled. "You saved my life twice. I just gave you a dress and a job. You gave me purpose. You gave Sophie a mother. You gave me permission to love again. That's more than dresses and jobs." They sat together watching their family, Sophie celebrating with teammates, the twins babbling happily, the life they'd built from bullets in parking garages and humiliation in boutiques. Kenneth had walked into that luxury store expecting judgment. Got it, but also found redemption, found love, found proof that character isn't measured by clothes or money. It's measured by how you treat people when they can't do anything for you. Brian had judged Kenneth by appearance. Piper had seen beyond it. That choice made all the difference. Sometimes the person everyone dismisses is actually the hero. Sometimes the janitor in worn jeans is the man who'll save your life. Sometimes love starts in the most unlikely places, luxury boutiques and parking garages, and moments when you choose kindness over cruelty. Kenneth and Piper had found that love, had built a life on it, had proved that happy endings aren't about money or status. They're about seeing people, really seeing them, and choosing love, even when it's complicated, especially when it's complicated.